The Teaching of the Master by Brother L G Sargent. Part 2, Chapter 9, Rejoicing in the Name. Matthew chapter 5, verse 10 to 12. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. The happiness of the Beatitudes is not so much a state of mind as a condition of privilege. Yet there is one point in the series of sayings at which Jesus calls on those who are destined for the kingdom to know their happiness and rejoice in it. And, by a remarkable paradox, it is at the climax when he calls blessed those who suffer persecution for his sake. The 3 verses in which he does so, verses 10 to 12, are deeply penetrated by the language of Isaiah. In particular, there are allusions to Isaiah 51, verses 7 to 8. In Isaiah 50, it is shown that the instrument of the Lord's salvation will suffer more than even the children whom he comes to save, the afflicted or poor of verse 13. Because his ear is open to command, and he is not rebellious, he is able to say, I gave my back to the smiters, and my cheeks to them that plucked off the hair. I hid not my face from shame and spitting. He sets his face like a flint, because it is the Lord eternal who justifies him, while those who condemn him shall wax old as a garment, the moth shall eat them up. And as the servant is not alone in suffering, so his endurance is not only for his own sake, it is an encouragement to the man who fears the Lord and obeys the voice of his servant, to trust in the name of the Lord and to stay upon his God. For if the heavens and the earth are to be shaken, so that the dwellers on the earth vanish with it, the things which are unshakable shall remain for those who receive a kingdom which cannot be moved. My salvation shall be forever, and my righteousness shall not be abolished. And it is in this setting, and in the light of the example of the suffering servant, for his very words about the perishing garment and the corrupting moth are taken up again, that the message comes. Hearken unto me, ye that know righteousness, the people in whose heart is my law. Fear ye not the reproach of men, neither be ye afraid of their revilings. For the moth shall eat them up like a garment, and the worm shall eat them like wool. But my righteousness shall be for ever, and my salvation from generation to generation. What is startling in Matthew 5, verse 11, is that Jesus equates suffering for righteousness' sake with suffering for my sake. Who is this who identifies righteousness with himself and himself with righteousness? Isaiah provides the answer, for the whole setting of the words alluded to in Matthew is messianic. It concerns the kingdom and the servant who must needs suffer and enter into his glory, and it declares that as with the teacher, who has the tongue of the learned, so must it be with those who obey his voice. Let it be noted that those who obey the voice of his servant are also those who follow after righteousness. The identification which Jesus takes to need no explaining is already made in Isaiah. But the point can be carried further. For my sake sounds like an echo of Isaiah 66 verse 5, where the Lord himself is the speaker. Hear the word of the Lord, ye that tremble at his word. Your brethren that hated you, that cast you out for my name's sake, said, Let the Lord be glorified. But he shall appear to your joy, and they shall be ashamed. For my name's sake is actually the reading of Matthew 5 verse 11 in the Old Syriac, which P.P. Levitoff says is probably not a variant, but an idiomatic rendering. In any case, the expression is found on the Lord's lips in Matthew 10 verse 22, 19 verse 29, Matthew 13 verse 13, Luke 21 verse 12 and 17. Only one could speak in this way, and that is he who is the salvation of the Lord embodied in flesh, and who bears his name. He himself tells the disciples in the very words of Isaiah, Ye shall be hated of all men for my name's sake. In verse 12 there is a direct reference to the prophets, which may be something more than a historical allusion. It shows how fully Jesus was thinking of the prophetic word. Rejoice and exult, says Jesus, as though the gladness of the coming festival of the kingdom were already yours. For the word has a festal ring illustrated in the accounts of Hezekiah's Passover and the dedication of a rebuilt wall of Jerusalem. The rejoicing is in praise and to the glory of God. Such also is the joy of their Lord when he celebrates his entry into the kingdom which he has received, and which he invites the good and faithful servants to share. Their reward is in the heavens, that is, with God, laid up as a treasure in the divine purpose, for the kingdom is prepared from the foundation of the world. In Peter's phrase, the reward is reserved in heaven. The thought is exactly that of David. O how great is thy goodness which thou hast laid up for them that fear thee. In the light of Old Testament turns of speech, it is clear that Matthew 6 verses 19 to 20 is an expansion of the reward in heaven of chapter 5 verse 12. In a similar way, Jesus can use another familiar Old Testament figure, the book of God in which are written the names of those who live unto him. Thus he can tell the disciples to rejoice that their names are written in heaven. Like so many of the vital images of the Old Testament, this goes back to Moses, who prays to God, rather than that Israel should be unforgiven, Blot me, I pray thee, out of thy book which thou hast written. Isaiah can say of the remnant, He that is left in Zion, and he that remaineth in Jerusalem, shall be called holy, even every one that is written among the living, margin, to life, in Jerusalem. Unquestionably the meaning is eternal life, the life of the kingdom. So Jesus interprets it and carries on the figure. The saying left a mark on its hearers, which was ineffaceable. When they were discharged by the Sanhedrin, the apostles departed from the presence of the council, rejoicing that they were counted worthy to suffer for the name. Peter says, If you suffer for righteousness' sake, happy, blessed are ye. And inasmuch as ye are partakers of Christ's sufferings, rejoice, that when his glory is revealed, ye may be glad also with exceeding joy. Again in the next verse, if ye be reproached for the name of Christ, happy, blessed are ye. Was James, the Lord's brother, also among the hearers? Nowhere are there more allusions to the sermon than in his letter. Take, my brethren, the prophets who have spoken in the name of the Lord, for an example of suffering, affliction, and of patience. Behold, we count them happy, blessed, which endure. Count it all joy when you fall into manifold trials. Blessed is the man that endureth temptation, for when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life. The allusions are obvious. Paul, too, reveals his acquaintance with the teaching of the Master. With these verses we complete the study of the Beatitudes. It has been extensive and detailed because in these sayings we have the foundation on which the discourse is built. To trace the roots of the words of Jesus in their ramifications through the soil of the Old Testament is much more than a fascinating literary research. It is to discover that in these brief sayings is the quintessence of the prophets, a distillation of the hope of Israel.